Well, good morning, everyone. And every day we rise, it's a great day to be alive. Welcome to the Portsmouth Coffee Talk podcast. I'm James Overton, and I'm here with co-hosts Leah Drake Stitt and Thomas the Colonel Chapman. Good morning, co-hosts. How you doing?
Good morning. For some
Yeah,
reason, I cannot see the screen. Let me start again.
yeah, we see you, and
Okay.
I brought you on. Yeah, we see you
Okay,
perfectly.
that's fine. Let's go ahead on then, and I'll get my end straight, okay?
Okay, all right. Okay, today and good Monday morning to everyone. And today we have a special guest, and his name is Attorney Derek Challenger, and he's a deputy city attorney in the city of Portsmouth. And good morning, Attorney Challenger. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Good
A
morning.
fellow Hampton Roads resident, grew up in Hampton, went to Hampton University, and where did you go to law school?
I went to law school, University of Baltimore Law School. I did a joint JD MBA program there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we talked about that in our pre-talk about the NBA and how important that was to you to go that route. Make sure you got that MBA before the law school, and explain why you went that route. Because a lot of lawyers are doing that now, having that MBA along with their law degree.
And for first, one of the reasons why I went to University of Baltimore Law School is they gave me a little bit of money to go there.
Yeah,
So
that helps.
at the time, that was very much needed. But I did the joint JD MBA program because doing it independently of each other is 3 years for law school, 2 years to get an MBA. But if you do a joint JD MBA program, it only adds an extra year. So as opposed to the normal 3 years, I was in law school for 4 years, and they share credits. So
Oh, okay.
so my first year of law school, it was solely law school. I wasn't able to start my MBA classes until my second year. And the way it worked was you take law school classes in the daytime. The MBA classes are in the evenings. And even the MBA program is more catered to people who already have jobs.
Oh,
Most
okay.
law students don't have jobs. So I would go to school during the day, and I would take MBA classes either from 5:30 to 8 or 8:15 to 10:45 at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Wow, that
by
sounds almost like 24-hour school.
24 hours, 24 hours of school.
it, it was a
But
lot. And by my third year, I was working full time.
Oh,
oh,
wow.
okay. Wow. And he had to work along with it. Yeah. So you worked in Baltimore for a while. So what brought you back home to the Hampton Roads area?
For one, it's home. And when I went to Baltimore, I didn't have any family at all in Baltimore or Maryland, period. All my family was in Hampton Roads. And as I got older, family started having health issues. My grandmother was up in age. My mother had a aneurysm right after I came back, a brain aneurysm. So it was just great timing that I came voluntarily, because I would have been coming back involuntarily after my mom got sick. So it was mostly because of family issues or concerns as to what prompted me to come back. The other part about it is Baltimore has a lot of issues. So when I went to Baltimore, the main
More
reason
than
why,
more than Portsmouth?
yes, more than Portsmouth.
Okay.
Um, and it's in my mind, Portsmouth in terms of urban issues is about 10 to 20 years um, behind Baltimore. I mean, the type of issue that you see in Baltimore were in Portsmouth were what it was when I was there 10, 20 years ago.
Mm.
Mhm.
And because it's just years of neglect. It's years of neglect, years of folks who feel hopeless. So after when I went there, that was one of the reasons why I went there, because I was very idealistic. I wanted to change the world. I realized the NAACP headquarters was located in Baltimore. And I was like, oh, that seems like a great place to go and help. So I went there my first year of law school and second year of law school. I was the community service All-American. I was at the POW centers. I was at the community centers. And so when I was in school, I was doing that. But I got burnt out. You know, I was dealing that had so many issues, and I was so idealistic. I thought I could change everything. And what ended up happening was it ended up changing me into not wanting to do it.
Yeah, we've all been there. Trying to be the catalyst of
kind
change.
of how I got to Baltimore and became eager to leave Baltimore. And it was even worse because when I would come home every month, I didn't see the same type of issues that I saw in Baltimore. I mean, when I was in Baltimore, they had the cameras everywhere, kind of like you see now in every city. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, the level of homelessness that I saw in Baltimore, the level of drug addiction. My office was at 711 St. Paul Street in Baltimore, and we would have clients come to our office, and while they were in our office, they would leave, and the windows would be broken because they had left something in their car. Somebody had broke their windows, took their stuff. They would call the police. The police would come an hour later and pretty much tell them, oh, you need to be more careful and not leave stuff in your car. We're not going to go look for the person. We're not going to do anything because it's no point. Just contact your insurance company. It didn't make for a very good look for our office. And we were at 711 St. Paul Street, they called it Midtown, but it was pretty much downtown Baltimore. So I got tired of that. I wanted to be back home, and I'm glad to be back home.
Well, I'm glad you chose Portsmouth to come back to, and with that experience of being in Baltimore is probably a great help to what you do for the city of Portsmouth. So let's get to the subject at hand. We wanted to bring you on to sort of share some information about how the city government works, and one of the reasons I wanted to do that, I noticed either watching city council meetings how people will go before city council and have an issue or complain about something. Sometimes they should have gone to the school board, or sometimes they should have gone through the process first before they get to city council, because they can't get much help if they go there before they've gone through the process. So I wanted to have you to come on and sort of explain some of the process. But before you do, talk about, you in the city attorney's office, talk about the role of the city attorney as far as the city is concerned, with this city manager form of government and our elected officials.
The city attorney's office is responsible for representing the city council, the city manager, the 19 or so departments of the city. It's more of a general counsel role. So it's not much different than if I was at Coca-Cola and I was general counsel for Coca-Cola. We handle all of the affairs of the city. So with that being the case, a common misconception that citizens have is that our office is there to represent them. And they a lot of times citizens believe that the whole of the city is responsible for advancing their issues. And that's obviously for our office is actually the opposite. We're there to protect the department, to protect the city of Portsmouth as a entity. So that's the general purpose of it. So whenever, for instance, a police involved shooting, our office will either represent the officer, or we would hire an outside lawyer to handle that case. Whenever there is a lawsuit against the city itself, we represent the city in that matter. The other thing that our office does a lot of is review contracts. There are many contracts that involve the city. We also provide general counsel representation to all of the departments. So if you're in the HR department and you're trying to determine how you react to new laws, we're the one that you would go to, and we would explain that. We have a great city attorney, and LaVonda Graham Williams. She's been with our office for about 3 years, and on a personal level, it's been great having her brought in, because I've been practicing law now since 2001, and I kind of got to a point where I thought I pretty much knew pretty much all the things that goes into practicing law. But it's always great to see someone come in and they have a different approach, and you learn some different things that you didn't think you were going to learn. So I appreciate her role. And we have a great deputy city attorney who serves alongside me, Jeff Miller, who's a very good attorney. And I think we have a very good team. It's especially important for me that we all are kind of the same age range. We're very much peers. So we have a lot of meeting together. And when I was in private practice, it was the exact opposite. The person who brought me in was a lot older. So it was more of a father-son relationship. But now I get the opportunity to have people who are at the same level, and we can kind of feed off each other, not only in terms of the practice of law, but also just life. So that's kind of what the city attorney's office does. And in terms of the earlier question about how does city government works in general, and how does
But before you go there, Attorney Challenger, I just want to say I'm glad you explained that, because some people get mixed up with the responsibilities of the Commonwealth Attorney and the City Attorney. And you explained it well as far as the City Attorney, it doesn't represent citizens. It's basically there for the city as a whole. And I've seen some people sort of question why the City Attorney, the lead City Attorney, didn't deal with something that probably was something that the Commonwealth Attorney is supposed to do. So some people get those responsibilities mixed up sometimes, and sort of blame the City Attorney for not doing something that it's not in her realm to do that. So thanks for explaining that. But go ahead. The process.
And the other thing I was going to say in reference to what you just said, we probably get a call every day for someone looking for the Commonwealth Attorney's office. So it's very easy to understand how a citizen would not know. And I'm glad you're doing this show on this subject, because it took me years in the city attorney's office to be able to understand exactly all the stuff as to how the city works. And I think citizens that go to the city council meetings on a regular basis get a good understanding as to how the city operates by attending the city council meetings. And I think in terms of a person having a concern, like for instance, let's say I had a concern as it relates to the water or sewage. The first thing you have to realize is which department handles that. And when I first got to the city attorney's office, I wasn't sure between the distinction between public works and public utilities. And so you first got to know which department is even responsible for what your concern is. And then you got to figure out who there in that department you need to reach out to get your question answered. And that required, for me, I think the first place you should look is the website for the city. there's a lot of great information on the website, and it would tell you exactly what department, who is in the department, and what they do in that department. That is often something you can find just by looking on the website. And I think it's helpful to find a person in that department who is assigned to the concern that you have, work with that person to the best of your ability to get it worked out at a level that's appropriate for your concern. And be mindful of the fact that if you don't necessarily get the result you want, it may be because that's just the way it is. And also, it may be that you have an opportunity to bring that issue to that person's department head. Every department has a department head that answers to the city manager. And that's the way it works. You have the city manager who appoints or had the ability to appoint department heads for all of those departments that run the city. And that department head is ultimately responsible for what goes on in that particular department. And below and above that person, the city manager. So in terms of the city manager form of government, the city manager acts as a CEO. That is the way it works. And the city council is, as you're talking about in a corporate context, is more akin to the board of directors of a corporation. So they're not full-time. They appoint a city manager to handle the day-to-day operations of the city. They appoint a city attorney to handle the legal affairs on a day-to-day basis. They hire a city assessor to handle the assessments of property. So it's really a corporation. Every city is considered a municipal corporation, just like a church is considered a religious corporation. Almost every entity that you deal with is some type of corporation or some type of business entity. Even though people think of the city as being something else, it's ultimately a corporation.
Any questions from the host?
Yeah, Derek, thanks for coming on first. And
you're welcome.
Yes. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. So city manager is hired, and then they appoint, or he or she appoints the managers of the different departments. But they're not hired, but they're appointed.
They're the only people that are appointed by anyone is the city council, and the city manager can hire and fire department heads. So, for instance, that doesn't necessarily mean that that city manager has hired every single department head, because it may very well be that when that city manager was brought on, that city department head was already there. But the city manager had the ability, if they wanted to get rid of this department head that were already there. If they wanted to bring in somebody that was more their personality, their philosophy, they could do so. So at the end of the day, those department head answer to the city manager. So the city manager has the ability to end their employment at any point they want to. And that's the way it works from a management level. And then the department head is ultimately responsible for the people in this department.
So those positions, so the positions that city manager can hire and fire, and when I say fire at will?
They can fire at will. You serve at the pleasure of the city manager, just like I serve at the pleasure of the city attorney. And so the city attorney's office is a little different than the other departments, because the city attorney has his own appointee of city council. So my boss could say, it's been nice having you, Derek, but we don't really need you around anymore. at any point she desires. And the city manager can do the same thing with its department heads without giving a reason. It doesn't happen that way as a general practice, because that person has developed a lot of institutional knowledge. And once you get rid of someone, you lose the institutional knowledge that that person has. So it doesn't happen willy-nilly like that in terms of just people just wholeheartedly getting rid of people. But they have the ability to do so.
Yeah. Reason I'm getting there, and it just hit this nerve with me, is in the past we've had some sweet. I know you have to go through the contracts because people that work for the city has a contract, and I'm looking at some of the sweetheart deals that some people got in the past, and especially during a couple city managers before that, people left and got what we call those golden parachutes. And if I'm got a hired will statute, why was the city on the hook for, and it's been reported, over $1 million collectively for some of these sweetheart deals?
You refer to them as sweetheart deals. I will refer to them as necessary contract to get people to come to a employment where there is a uncertainty about how long you're going to be there. So, for instance, let's say I am the person that's being considered for a particular department head, and I look at the news and I look at the prior people who were in that position, and I see that they're, you don't normally stay there. Nobody is in that position for longer than a couple of years. Then I wouldn't come there and for that position if there was no level of security that it was same thing wouldn't happen to me. And it's the same thing if you're talking about an appointee as well. There's a corollary between stability as well as concerned about the fiscal realities of the money that you're talking about as well, because at some point it becomes difficult to get hires, because they're like, oh, if I can, there's 7 cities. So if you're in this area, you can pick and choose which local government you can be involved in. And you're not the only game in town. So if I see there's some greater stability somewhere else, I'll just go there. So the only way you can get somebody else to come to where they perceive to be more risky is either by offering them more money or some type of severance agreement to keep them there. So it's really designed to provide some level of comfort to employees that they will not be let go willy-nilly. And if so, they will be compensated for whatever it is. And this is agreed to up front. To me, it's no different than if you're going to get married and you say, hey, I'm 50 years old. If I get divorced tomorrow, there goes my retirement, there goes my whatever, and I'm planning on retiring in 15 years or whatever. So I get a prenuptial agreement. And all that's really saying is, hey, let me do this on the front end. On the front end, let's say this is how much we get if there's a separation from our marriage. To me, a severance agreement is the same thing. You do it on the front end saying, if this doesn't work out, this is how we're going to address this, as opposed to I get terminated a couple of months into starting work, and then I got to negotiate it when I have no power whatsoever.
Yeah, I got that. And that's an excellent concept. And I'm just thinking to myself, in some of the contracts, if I come in as a city employee, and would it be better for me to be hired, or better for the city just to hire on a timestamp thing where I can renew or not renew your contract after a set period? Meaning everybody comes up to a year. And so after a year, we decide to shake hands and go on. And I have no severance pay with it, and I show you the door.
Yeah, I think severance agreements have a vital role to play when you have a history of instability.
Yeah.
And the real question you're talking about is what is the quality of applicants you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And if your number one goal is to get good candidates, you want to remove any type of barriers for good candidates to apply.
Mm-hmm.
And not only apply, but okay, you get them in the door, but if they start seeing a bunch of people being let go, they start looking themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure that they stay there, because if they don't stay there, then you won't have the situation where they leave, and then it's even harder to find someone else in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And then that department is going to suffer because they don't have a department head. So then they end up having someone that serves in that role in the interim status. So now they're probably one less person in that department to do the work, which creates problems as a whole, and it's not sustainable to do that for long periods of time. So you're really talking about providing stability, not only to city government, but to the citizens they serve. So when the news media does those articles and they say, oh, you know, we had X number of people who received severance packages, and they aggregate the amount, they're not necessarily looking at the full picture. And I think the full picture of it is it's a relatively small amount of money when you compare it to the budget of a city. You know, $1 million to a city is significant, but it's not astronomical when you start talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in a city budget.
Yeah, it's a rounding error.
Yeah, that's in essence what it is. And
it just sounds that way to the citizens.
Yeah, it
sounds like a lot to the citizens.
It does. It does.
It's a hard pill to swallow for us regulars for $1 million, and especially when it comes so often. And I guess the conversation pretty much explains what happened here in the city of Portsmouth for the last 5 years. You know, so I see what you're saying. Yeah, you have to give those incentives, especially when they look at the history, look at the situation, the history, and say,
sure.
And then we don't have to get deep into this, but a lot of that falls on your leadership, your elected leadership, and how they perceive the work of whoever they hire. You know, whether it's in our eyes somebody's doing a good job, and they look at it as not being a good job, and then we end up paying a lot of money, you know, as far as the city. So whether it's warranted or not. So
and it's also being wise in who you select for positions. And if you're trying to bring people in from out of this area, you've uprooted your family, you've uprooted everything that you know to come to a really unstable situation. As James said, once we can get the leadership in a stable position where people can feel comfortable coming into the city, then we will have less chances that we will have to pay out that kind of money, because people will feel comfortable about coming to the city to work in a city that has a stable government. Our government has been so unstable for so long because of the fraction within the council that caused people, you really had to have an incentive to get quality people to come into the city of Portsmouth. And I can truly understand. I truly would not come if I did not have a package saying that I'm going to be taken care of. My family's going to be taken care of if I uproot and come into the city. So I truly understand the need for such a package. And prayerfully, the city will get to a point where the council is stable and we don't have to worry about those things anymore, because people will be able to come into a work environment where they will feel comfortable and they will have longevity. So I understand what you're saying, Derek. We need it.
And let me get into this too. You know, city codes and the city charter, and the difference there. I think the city charter, the council can't just change things in the charter without going to the General Assembly, and the city code is sort of different because it includes ordinances and things like that. can you explain the difference between the two and who has? Well, I'm sure the charter has precedence. I mean, is above the codes, but it involves a little bit more than just the city codes.
You're correct. The city charter is supreme over the code. And in order to get the city charter changed, you have to go to the General Assembly to get any type of changes. And the General Assembly had to approve any changes to the charter. But as a practical matter, Virginia is a Dillon rule state. Meaning that the city only has the powers that has been provided to it through the state. So the city doesn't have the ability to just decide that they want to do something without getting permission from the state. So that's the general gist of it. And the charter is an important document. This is my personal thought. I always thought there was too much emphasis on the charter, making charter changes. And the reason why I always felt that was because I never thought we never had enough legislation. I think we always have enough legislation. It's, can you enforce the legislation that you already have? Because I mean, you can create 1,000,001 laws, but what difference does it make that you have 1,000,000 laws or 900,000 laws if you're not enforcing but 75 of the laws that you have? And that goes back to the capacity. You have to have the capacity to do so. For instance, this is not city charter or city code, but as it relates to crime, there are a lot fewer officers than what we need. And that has been consistently the problem, not just for the city of Portsmouth, but in general, in most cities. So the General Assembly can create all these different additional criminal laws, but who's going to be there to enforce it? So to me, I always thought there was more of an emphasis on enacting laws as opposed to enforcing the laws that you already have. And then the more laws you create and you're not enforcing it, you're giving people a disincentive to abide by any of them. Because once you could ride around the city and throw something out your car and start littering, and there's no repercussions, it makes a person feel like, oh, I can go do something else. I'm a speed. Anybody that's been riding on any street in the last couple of years can tell, it feels like you ride on the Indianapolis 500 every time you ride on the interstate or any street. So consequently, I think there's too much of a emphasis on new laws and not enough emphasis on enforcing laws and having the infrastructure out there to be able to do so.
Yeah, and the charter is more of a state law, and more important for a city are their codes and everything. And most people don't know all the codes until they violate them. and like you said, you know, does the city have enough? Oh. I mean, it's codes about bicycles, you know, animal, you know, everything. Who knows about the bicycle code? You know, what side of the street you should ride on or something like that.
Right.
So it's enough codes to not even. I agree with you when I see some council people trying to change the charter when we're still struggling trying to enforce the codes that we have that's catered to our city. So, but I just wanted to make that distinction between the two. Usually, the charter is not as important, you know, in most cases as the codes, you know, that have to be enforced.
And the one thing I will say, city council is a very difficult job. And so I would give them always a level of deference because it's difficult to sit in that chair. And when you're an elected person, and I think most people, when they take that role, they are the type of individuals that I mentioned earlier when I was very interested in community service. You have good intentions, and I think most people have good intentions, and it's very difficult to have a role where it's not even a full-time position. It's a part-time position. You may have another job, and you're trying to address these policy changes where there often isn't a right or wrong answer. I give you an example: collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is something that the city is addressing, and it's a decision. It costs money to implement it. There's factions that want it, and there's factions that don't want it. So if you decide to do it or not do it, it's not like it's a right or wrong answer. It's a decision you make, and you have to go forward with what decision you decide to do. But it's not as though there's a right or wrong answer. And I think most things, it's not a right or wrong answer. It's just a question of policy, which way you want to go. So I think I give anybody credit who is willing to sit in that chair and have to be confronted by their voters whenever they make a decision they don't like. Because I like going to the grocery store and not being harassed when I'm trying to buy my milk about a decision that I made. So it takes a special person to do that and be willing to go out into public and have to confront the people who voted for them.
That's
true. You definitely have to realize that going in, before you even think about running. That's a part of the job, part of that part-time job.
It's certainly a part of it. And I remember when I was a young person, I was on the front page of the newspaper several times for community service type things that I did. And at the time, I was a little naive, not appreciating the level of the media. And so when someone contacted me from the media when I was a teenager or in my 20s, I was
You were ready. You were ready.
Yes. I was ready. I was excited. I remember my mother and grandmother getting that newspaper from the Daily Press and buying multiple copies of it. And I was walking around happy and proud. But then you get a little older and realize that just like it can be your friend and build you up, they can
tear you down. That's right.
So I think often we tend to be we see the good side. We want to see the good side of everything until it's not good. And I think there's different types of personalities that we all need in society. I think lawyers, for instance, are by nature risk averse. And that's one of the reasons why we take the jobs that, we want to know upfront how much we're going to get paid and all these type of things, as opposed to a person who's in the business world. They're more risk tolerant. They don't have to have this safety, but they want more of an upside. So I think society, we have to recognize who we are, what we're comfortable with, and stay in our lane, because there is risk in everything, and you got to figure out what's worth it for you.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you use the word the upside. So I think earlier you talked about, or you addressed saying that your office looks at all the statutes and laws that come down that affect the city. And so I think we look at what's happened on the national and state, and it sort of feeds down process, national, state, and federal, state, and then our local. And we saw where the demise of affirmative action, and now we have the demise of federally stated getting rid of the DEI programs across the country. And then so how does that affect how the city gets its contracts when it has an office that says that we want to increase that. Well, in the past, we said we wanted to increase diversity amongst city contracts to even out the playing field from decades of discrimination. But now we have a federal government, and we also had a state government, because I always call him a Confederate governor, that says there's no discrimination in there. We need to get away from all that. And so
that's a great question.
Yes,
that's a great question, and I wish I could tell you I knew the answer to it, but this is a very in flux situation as we look at the federal government and see how this impacts the local municipalities. Because you're right, we did 2 disparity studies, and they both showed that we were underutilizing African American contractors, and so we created this whole infrastructure to address that. And then now you have a situation where the federal government is saying, hey, if you're doing a diversity and equity program, you're at risk of losing funding. Luckily, we have these organizations in the legal world that are helping us make those decisions and helping us with that fight. For instance, in Virginia, it's called the Local Government Attorneys of Virginia. So they're all throughout the state. There are attorneys who we meet. We have a place we can do a listserv, and we're addressing these issues not individually as one city, but as a whole. Then we have something called the International Municipal Lawyers Association, in which, as a nation, lawyers that are dealing with municipal law, we are addressing these issues as a whole. And there's been cities and states, predominantly states, that have filed lawsuits already as it relates to this very issue. And every week there is some information that's being passed along to municipalities as to what we are doing collectively to address this issue. But where it ends up, if I knew the answer to that one, I think I'll be going to Rivers Casino today.
So, here's the other piece, another question, since I got you on here as a lawyer, and I see that Anna Ham's on here too, as another
Alana Ham.
And so these executive orders, do they have the force of law that has been passed by Congress?
It has a force of law, but it can be challenged. And it's interesting from a political standpoint. I'm a political junkie. That depending upon which administration is in office, as to whether executive orders are a good or a bad thing. So whenever your side is in power, executive orders is great, but when you're not in power, they're horrible. And the thing about executive orders, they're easy to be targeted for litigation. So a lot of the executive orders that's been out there have been challenged. There have been, most complaints for declaratory judgment and injunctions filed, temporary restraining orders. There are all these legal efforts to say you as the executive branch is exceeding your authority. And that you're not abiding by the procedure that's been set forth to do these things. So but the problem is that you're on the side that you don't like what's being done. It takes time for those things to work its way through court. And if you have so many executive orders that's going on, it's hard to keep up. So even if you wanted to challenge them, when you get to a certain number, you got to have the infrastructure to be able to strategically keep up with them and file whatever you want to file in the respective courts to address it. And have to have the ability to be able to litigate this for months, if not years, to get to the result. So I think we'll be dealing with this for a long time. And it's definitely for others to decide about whether or not this is the direction or way a country should be governed.
Yes.
And when you're talking about the executive orders on the national level, when you talk about the city manager on the city level, he has a certain power that he has. What is the threshold of the amount of money? Because many city council meetings, what comes before the city manager getting approval from city council to accept some certain amount of funds or to spend a certain amount of funds. What can he do without the city manager's, city council's approval as far as how far he can, really spend? I think we had an issue like that with another one of our city managers doing something that the city council thought was outside of her realm of spending money that she should have come to the council for. What is exactly the city manager's role as far as that concerned?
And I don't remember the exact number value that it was, and I have a number in my mind, but I don't want to say the wrong number. But I would say this: in that situation that you're talking about, if it's the same one I remember, it ultimately the amount that was involved was within that person's authority. So, and I don't think that's something that is a major problem that we have or a major issue that we have, because at the end of the day, the city manager is an appointee of city council. So I don't think we generally have an issue with that person, whoever that person may be at the time, wanting to do anything that is contrary to what city council would want in the first place. But I would say this too: when you give the city manager, who is the equivalent of a chief executive officer in a private corporation, you hire that person because of their expertise as it relates to management. So to me, I think you would want to be able to have trust that the city manager that you hire has the authority to address things in their best, that they see it in their best interests. If not, then why did you appoint a person if you don't have confidence in their ability? And you're talking about a person as a city manager who routinely addresses contracts that's 6 figures, sometimes 7 figures on a regular basis. So I think that is a question of confidence and you having people in place that you trust. And I think that's the important part of the city manager form of government is you say, city, we hire professional managers to manage city. They're not someone that's elected. They're hired, and sometimes they do national searches to find this person. So to me, it's you want to give the person the tool to be able to do their job. And city government is different than a corporation. A corporation, your only interest is profit and being able to provide the goods and services to your customers. In a city, you also have a more of a humanitarian role. Like, for instance, the last city council meeting, the last 2 city council meetings, there's been a lot of discussion about what we do with homeless populations. I think we have an obligation to address so many different issues as a municipality that a private company doesn't have to deal with. So you want to have trust in the people that you hire, because you're asking a lot of them to not only make sure that the city is on a good financial ground, but also how are we dealing with homelessness? How are we dealing with substance abuse issues? How are we dealing with affordable housing? I mean, the amount of issues that you put on municipality to address is so great that you need to be confident in the people that you hire and the authority to give them.
And also a part of what citizens should understand as a part of the level of government, as far as finances are concerned, is the appointed board of the EDA, the Economic Development Authority, and they have their own budget, and they do some things that the city council as a body can't do, as far as contracting and bringing in businesses, and people need to understand that level of government as well.
Yes, it's a necessary aspect of it. The city has undergone a lot of positive advancement as it comes to economics in the last several years. We start talking about the casino. You start talking about just the development throughout the city. When I come on High Street, I see development all around. And I think city council should get credit, because a lot of times folks don't realize a lot of those issues come up before for use permits, for zoning changes. The city council has to play a role in allowing this development. Economic development has a role. The city manager, everybody has a role. And I think you can see the fruits of that just by riding through the city, and you see the amount of economic activity that's going on. Because if you're a person who cares about social type things, when you're talking about homelessness or anything else, you need money to do so. You need taxes to do so. So I think we all the folks who make that happen should be applauded, because the economic activity that I see in the city is the greatest that I've seen personally in the 9 years that I've been in the city. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the responsibilities of the city council people, the commitment they make, people need to understand it's a larger picture of people working in the background to make things happen. And of course, they should be aware of all those things, but the citizens should also be aware of who does what and who has certain responsibilities, so. And you can watch the meetings of the EDA and the Planning Commission, so you can keep up with what's going, because a lot of the businesses that come up, or a lot of the issues come to them first, and then goes to city council for their approval. So
you're right. And when you talk about the Planning Commission, the Retirement Board, all these various meetings are available on YouTube, and you can watch them at your leisure. The city council meetings are available on YouTube. So I think if you really want to be informed, watching those meetings are a good place to start. And the other thing that I think is a good place to start is, if you really, really care about it, watch the city council meeting in Portsmouth, but also watch the neighboring cities, because there's no right or wrong way. And sometimes you can glean some other things by comparison. So I think that's a good way to become involved, as well as paying attention to the website, because there's a lot of information that's on there, and you just got to go through it to be able to piece it together, especially the budget. If you want to understand anything, you need to look at the budget.
Yeah, we try to, and that's the budget process be coming up in the next few months, I guess. And
yes, you're right.
Is there anything out there that citizens can study now? I guess the city manager will do his presentation, but what do the city citizens need to be paying attention to now, leading up to the budget process? Is it anything that, I guess what you just mentioned?
The only thing I would say is become comfortable being able to read the last year's budget, because it's the same format. It's the same format year to year. And if you can understand it, because I'll be honest, it took a lot of time for me looking at the budget to be able to appreciate all the nuances that are involved. So I think the greatest thing you can do is be able to understand prior year budgets, so that when you get this year's budget, you already know where to look for the things that you care about. Because a budget is really a city's priority list, because again, the city only has but so much money. So it's a question of how much money you're going to put to what priority. There's a bunch of issues that the city had to address, everything from jails to old infrastructure in terms of, it's a lot of things that you had to put money toward. The question becomes how much money going to each priority.
Yeah, and before, I know Colonel has something else before we run out of time. Encourage the citizens, because during the budget process and during city council meetings, a lot of citizens are discouraged and don't think they have any kind of power, but they have those public sessions before the budget is approved. And just encourage the citizens how much their input can matter as far as the final approval of the budget. Some people don't think it matters, and it looks like it in some cases when they go there and state their cases. But it's more about being informed. Like you said, if you know last year's budget, then you see this year's budget, you know what might be necessary, in your neighborhood particularly.
I think citizens should be encouraged that we're all human beings. So if you're sitting in that meeting and somebody brings up a good point, regardless of who the person is who's bringing up the point, it may be something you hadn't thought of. And there are certain citizens that have come before city council, and I've been informed of stuff that I didn't know, or a perspective that I didn't know. So I think everybody has a voice, and I think everybody should exercise their voice. And they have a saying, from the mouths of babies, just to use an example. I don't think it's ever in anybody's interest to not take into consideration what someone's perspective is, because everybody's perspective is different. So I think when citizens come and express their concerns as well as their praise, I think it's welcome. And I know for myself, I often hear things at the city council meetings that I didn't know. For instance, I'm not from Portsmouth. I'm from Hampton, Virginia. So I didn't follow Portsmouth as growing up. So often I hear historical contexts that I didn't know, people I didn't know. So I think it's helpful, because everybody doesn't start with the same frame of reference as they have. So I think it is helpful.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I don't know.
Well, you know what? I know we're at the end of the 8 o'clock hour. So I'd like to say, Derek, thank you for coming on the show, giving us a civics lesson on how city government works, and how and trying to tie all these complex, sometimes people would say complex issues and topics all together in a simplistic way, so that everybody can understand on how they need to get involved. Because without involvement and without the public say so, then you can complain all you want, but you deserve what you get if you don't participate. And so that's how I'll end my thing before I go down this rabbit hole.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I can now say I've done a podcast. I had never done one before. Now I can say I can check that off my bucket list.
Yes. You did a great job, and hope to have you back, because it's going to always be some issues that we can cover. And I want to put this back up here, because I know you saw that. That's a fellow Baltimore, University of Baltimore School of Law. And she's been on our podcast many times, Anna, and she's from this area. She's actually the mayor's daughter. So I don't know. But she's a fellow graduate of your school there. So thanks again for coming on. Very informative, and we really appreciate you, and look forward to seeing you again. And we have a better, clearer understanding of some of the things, the roles that people play in the city of Portsmouth. So we appreciate it. All right, thanks everybody. Make sure you, if you're watching on YouTube live, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. We got your comments. You can comment even after we sign off, and share this information as well on our Facebook pages. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Be our guest on the Portsmouth